The blade was 8 inches of serrated, black steel. In the hands of a dragging 300-pound alien predator, it looked like a toothpick. But when he pointed it at the small, fragile-looking girl in the third row, the entire lecture hall went deathly silent. Everyone expected her to scream. Everyone expected her to run. In the Galactic Institute, humans were considered soft. They had no claws, no armor, and no venom. But she didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she looked at the massive beast threatening her life, and she smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a smile that promised something far worse than violence. And in that moment, the entire galaxy learned a lesson they would never forget. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we have a story that is going to absolutely blow your mind. It's a tale about underestimated strength, the terrifying biology of humanity, and why you should never, ever corner a predator, even if they look like prey. Now, before we dive into this absolute masterpiece of a story, I need you to do me a massive favor. Smash that like button until it breaks, hit subscribe, and turn on that notification bell so you never miss a journey into the unknown. I also want to know where my Earthborn squad is watching from today. Are you tuning in from the US, the UK, Australia, or somewhere else entirely? Let me know in the comments down below. I love seeing how global this community is becoming. Also, if you have a suggestion for the next genre we cover, drop it in the comments. Alright, grab a snack, settle in, and let's get into the story. The Stellar Zenith Institute was designed to intimidate. That was the first thing Jax noticed when he transferred there. The architecture was all sharp angles and cold chrome, built to accommodate species from the high-gravity core worlds. Jax, a Varakian with 4 eyes and a chitinous shell, felt reasonably tough. But even he felt small walking these halls. The student body was a nightmare of biodiversity. There were the Krogans, massive reptilian hulks with skin like tank armor, the Silva, insectoids who communicated in clicks and pheromones, and the ethereal wisps who were essentially sentient gas clouds. And then there were the humans. Or rather, the human. Her name was Aaira Vance. She was the only human in Professor Xylaz's advanced warp mechanics class. To Jax and to almost everyone else in the room, she looked absurdly fragile. She had no exoskeleton to protect her internal organs. She had no natural weapons, no fangs, no claws, no acid sacs. Her skin was soft and pale, easily bruised. She sat in the front row, always quiet, always taking notes on a primitive digital pad, looking for all the world like a lost child in a room full of monsters. The general consensus among the alien students was that humans were a mistake. Rumors circulated that they came from a Category 9 hazard world, a planetary designation usually reserved for worlds where life was chemically impossible. But looking at Aaira with her small frame and polite demeanor, nobody believed it. They assumed humanity had bought their way into the Institute through trade deals or pity. Unfortunately, Korg didn't have much pity. Korg was a Drakon, a species that looked like a cross between a gorilla and a crocodile, standing 8 feet tall and smelling of sulfur and ego. He was the undisputed alpha of the class, mostly because he threatened to snap the spine of anyone who corrected his math. It started subtly. A shoved shoulder in the hallway. A misplaced, heavy textbook dropped on Aira's desk while she was trying to work. Snide comments about soft skins wasting the Institute's oxygen. Jax watched it all from 3 rows back. He felt a pang of sympathy for Aaira, but he wasn't suicidal. You didn't intervene when a Drakon was having fun. That was the law of the jungle, and despite the high-tech surroundings, the Institute was still a jungle. One Tuesday, the atmosphere in the lecture hall was particularly thick. Professor Xylaz, a nervous avian creature, was trying to explain the theoretical limits of warp shielding, but Korg was bored. And when Korg was bored, he looked for a toy. Soft skin, Korg grunted, his voice sounding like rocks in a blender. He kicked the back of Aira's chair. Aaira didn't turn around. She just adjusted her posture and continued typing. "I'm talking to you, waste of space," Korg said louder this time. He leaned forward, his massive shadow engulfing her small desk. "My people conquer worlds before breakfast. Your people? What do? You look like you'd break if a strong wind hit you." The class went quiet. The professor stopped writing on the hollow board, his feathers fluffing up in distress, but he said nothing. Aaira finally stopped typing. She took a deep breath, a long, slow inhale that seemed to expand her ribcage more than should be possible for her size. She turned around slowly in her swivel chair. Her eyes were brown. Ordinary. But there was a flatness to them that Jax found unsettling. "Can I help you, Korg?" she asked. Her voice was steady, lacking the trembling frequency that usually accompanied fear and prey species. "You can help by leaving," Korg sneered, playing to his audience. A few of his sycophants chuckled, low guttural sounds. You don't belong here. This is an academy for the galaxy's elite. He pointed the tip of the blade at Aaira's throat. The steel was inches from her jugular. Or what? Korg whispered, a cruel grin stretching his reptilian face. Beg for your life, little human. Maybe I'll let you scurry away. Jax held his breath. This was it. The murder of a student in broad daylight. He braced himself for the scream. He waited for the panic. But Aaira Vance didn't move. She didn't tremble. She stared at the knife. Then she looked up at Korg's eyes. And then she smiled. The smile wasn't happy. It wasn't joyful. It was an exposure of teeth that triggered a primal alarm bell in the deepest, most lizard-brain part of Jax's mind. It was the baring of fangs. You shouldn't have done that, Aaira said. Her voice had dropped an octave. It wasn't a threat. It sounded like a statement of fact, like saying it is raining, or fire burns. Korg faltered for a microsecond. He had expected tears. He had expected begging. He didn't know what to do with a smile. You think this is funny? He stammered, his bravado slipping just a fraction. I think it's educational, Aaira said. She stood up. Compared to the 8-foot Drakon, she was tiny. She barely came up to his chest. But the way she stood, weight balanced on the balls of her feet, shoulders loose, hands open, suggested that her height was irrelevant. Professor, Aaira said, not looking away from the knife. Can I have the floor for a moment? Since Korg wants to talk about biology and predators. Professor Xylas was hiding behind his podium. Please, no violence. No violence, Aaira promised. Just a lecture. She took a step toward the knife. The tip pressed against the fabric of her uniform. Korg, confused by her advance, actually took a half step back. Tell me, Korg, Aaira said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. How does your species hunt? You're an ambush predator, right? Massive burst of energy, strike hard, kill fast. If the prey gets away, you give up because you overheat. Is that right? Korg growled, I do not fail. But if you did, Aaira pressed. If the prey ran, you couldn't chase it for long. Your physiology is built for sprinting. Anaerobic respiration. Lactic acid builds up in your muscles within minutes. You'd cramp. You'd collapse. She took another step. Korg stepped back again, the knife shaking slightly in his hand. He looked like a confused bear being backed down by a house cat. Do you know how humans hunted back before we had technology? Aaira asked. She tilted her head. We didn't have claws. We didn't have fangs. We weren't fast. But we had a superpower that you can't even comprehend. She tapped her chest. Endurance. We are persistence hunters, Korg. We don't need to be faster than you. We don't need to be stronger than you. We just need to keep walking. Jax watched, mesmerized. Aira's eyes were wide, the pupils dilated. She looked almost high. It's called adrenaline, she whispered, leaning in close to the blade. Right now, my body is flooding with it. My pain receptors are shutting down. My blood is redirecting to my muscles. My time perception is slowing down. To me, you're moving in slow motion. Korg swiped the knife through the air, a warning slash. Back off, he roared, but there was fear in his voice now. Aaira didn't flinch. She watched the blade pass with a calm, tracking gaze. You see, she continued, her voice taking on a terrifying, hypnotic rhythm. If you and I fought, you might hurt me. You might even kill me. But I promise you, I will take pieces of you with me. And if I don't die? If I just get hurt? She smiled again, wider this time. I will follow you. If you run, I will run after you. If you sleep, I will be there when you wake up. If you go to the ends of the galaxy, I will be right behind you. Because that is what my species does. We walk until the thing we are chasing dies of exhaustion. We are the monsters that never stop. The silence in the room was absolute. The air felt heavy, charged with the psychic weight of millions of years of evolutionary selection. Jax looked at Aaira and didn't see a girl anymore. He saw a Terminator. He saw a creature designed by nature to be the inevitable end of whatever it targeted. Korg was sweating. Heavy, oily drops of fear ran down his scales. His arm was trembling violently now. The primal narrative had flipped. He wasn't the hunter holding a weapon. He was the prey, and the predator was standing right in front of him, daring him to make a move. So, Aaira said, her voice dropping to a whisper that echoed like a thunderclap. Are you going to use that knife? Or are you going to drop it before I decide to show you what a death world really looks like? Korg looked at his knife. He looked at Aira's unblinking eyes. He looked at the class, searching for support but finding only terrified faces. The illusion of his dominance shattered. The realization hit him that if he attacked, she wouldn't just take it. She would tear him apart, not with strength but with sheer, unadulterated madness. Platter. The knife hit the floor. Korg backed away, his hands raised in a universal gesture of surrender. He was panting, his eyes wide with terror. I didn't," he mumbled. Aaira stopped smiling. Instantly, the terrifying aura vanished. She adjusted her collar, smoothed down her shirt, and looked back at the professor. "I believe that concludes the demonstration on predator dynamics, Professor," she said politely. "May I be excused to go to the administration office? I need to file a report about a destroyed data pad." Professor Xylas, who was currently clutching his chest feathers, just nodded mutely. Aaira bent down, picked up her bag and walked out of the lecture hall. She didn't look back at Korg, who was slumped against the wall, hyperventilating. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Korg didn't just get expelled, he practically fled the planet. His father, a high-ranking diplomat, tried to spin the story, claiming Aaira had used some kind of illegal psychic weapon. But the security footage didn't lie. It showed a 300-pound warrior dropping his weapon because a small girl talked to him. But the victory came with a cost. 3 days later, Jax walked into the main cafeteria. It was a massive, domed atrium capable of seating 5,000 students. Usually it was a chaotic mix of species, smells and sounds. Today it was segregated. In the center of the room there was a table. Sitting at it were the 4 human students currently enrolled at the institute. Aaira, a boy named Caleb, and 2 others Jax didn't know. Around their table was a zone of emptiness. A red line. No alien dared to sit within 20 feet of them. The story of Aaira's endurance paradox speech had spread like a virus. The translation of persistence hunter had been garbled in the rumor mill, mutating into immortal stalker and biological combat engine. Jack stood with his tray of nutrient paste, watching. The humans were eating sandwiches, chatting quietly, seemingly ignoring the fact that thousands of eyes were watching them with fear. "It's the human problem," a voice said beside him. Jax turned to see Professor Harkin, the xenobiology instructor. Harkin was an old, withered amphibian who had seen everything. "The human problem?" Jax asked. "Indeed," Harkin croaked, gesturing with a claw toward Aaira. "You see, Jax, the galaxy is full of specialists. The Drakon are strong. The Silva are fast. The Wisps are intelligent. But we are all rigid. We evolved in stable environments." Harkin tapped the side of his head. "Humans, they evolved in chaos. Ice ages, volcanoes, plagues, apex predators. To survive, they became generalists. They are stubborn. They bond with anything, even rocks. But mostly they are terrifyingly adaptable. You scare a Drakon, he fights. You scare a human? He invents a new way to kill you, then writes a poem about it." Jax looked back at the table. "They look lonely." "They are isolated," Harkin corrected. "Fear isolates. And right now, the galaxy is realizing that it invited a wolf into the sheep pen." The tension in the cafeteria was palpable. It felt like a wire pulled too tight. And then it snapped. A group of seniors from the Hive Collective, a species of insectoid warriors who valued uniformity above all else, marched toward the human table. There were 6 of them, their chitinous armor clicking as they walked. They surrounded Caleb, the human boy. Caleb was younger than Aaira, looking barely 18. He froze, his sandwich halfway to his mouth. "You," the lead Hive student clicked, his mandibles twitching. "Your presence disrupts the harmony. Your species is volatile. You must leave this feeding ground." Aaira, who had been reading a book, closed it with a soft thud. The cafeteria went silent again. Here we go, Jax thought. Round 2. But this time was different. The Hive students weren't just bullying, they were acting on a collective fear. They believed the humans were a biological contaminant. "We have the right to eat," Caleb said, his voice shaking slightly. "You have no rights, monster," the Hive student hissed. He reached out and knocked Caleb's tray onto the floor. "Go back to your death world." Aaira stood up. The Hive students immediately took combat stances, their claws raised. They had heard the stories. They were ready for this psychological warfare. But Aaira didn't smile this time. She didn't give a speech about hunting. She looked tired. She looked sad. She walked around the table and stood between Caleb and the insects. She didn't raise her hands. She kept them open, palms up. "We aren't monsters," Aaira said softly. "You threatened Korg with death," the Hive student accused. "I threatened Korg with reality," Aaira corrected. He pulled a knife. I stopped him without throwing a punch. "Isn't that what the Institute teaches? Diplomacy? De-escalation? You are dangerous. Yes, Aaira admitted. And that single word hung in the air. Yes, we are dangerous. Look at where we come from. We survived things that would kill most of you in minutes. We are dangerous. She took a step forward, not aggressively but imploringly. But being dangerous doesn't mean we are violent. There is a difference. The Hive student hesitated. This didn't fit the profile. The human was admitting to the accusation, yet pleading for understanding. Aaira looked around the room, addressing not just the bullies, but the thousands of students watching from the sidelines. She made eye contact with Jax, and for a moment he felt seen. My grandfather used to tell me a story, Aaira began, her voice projecting with that strange, confident cadence humans possessed. Back on Earth, thousands of years ago, there were wolves. They were predators. They hunted us and we hunted them. We were enemies. She lowered her hands. But one cold night, a wolf came to a human campfire. It was hungry. The humans were hungry too. They could have killed the wolf. The wolf could have tried to bite them. But they didn't. Aaira picked up a piece of bread from her tray. The human threw the wolf a piece of meat. The wolf ate it and sat down by the fire. Over time, that wolf didn't become less dangerous. It still had teeth. It still had claws. But it chose to use those teeth to protect the humans. And the humans used their spears to protect the wolf. She looked directly at the Hive leader. We called them dogs. They became our best friends. We pact bonded with a species that wanted to eat us. Aaira stepped closer to the clicking insectoid, violating his personal space, but with zero aggression. You're right. Humans are dangerous. We are stubborn, we are durable, and we don't know when to quit. But we learned a long time ago that cooperation beats competition. We learned that it's better to have a dangerous friend than a dead enemy. She gestured to the empty seats around them. The red line of segregation. You're scared of us because you think we're going to hurt you. But you're missing the point. If you let us sit with you, if you let us be your pack, we will be the ones standing between you and the nightmare. When the Korgs of the universe pull a knife on you, do you want to face them alone? Or do you want a Deathworlder watching your back? The silence that followed was different from the silence in the lecture hall. It wasn't a silence of fear. It was a silence of contemplation. Jax looked at the Hive leader. The insect's mandibles twitched, processing the logic. The Hive mind valued survival. The human was offering an alliance. A symbiotic relationship. The Hive leader slowly lowered his claws. He looked at Caleb, then at Aaira. Dogs? The insect clicked, confused by the translation. Loyal guardians, Aaira translated. Friends. The Hive leader chittered. It was a sound of dismissal but not aggression. Your tray is on the floor, he said to Caleb. That is inefficient. I'll get a new one, Caleb said, realizing he wasn't going to be attacked. The Hive group backed off, dispersing back into the crowd. The immediate threat was gone, but the red line remained. The other students were still watching, unsure if it was safe to approach the volatile humans. Jax felt his heart hammering against his ribs. He thought about what Professor Harkin had said. Humans bond with anything. He thought about Aaira facing down the knife. He thought about the wolf by the fire. Jax grabbed his tray. His legs felt like jelly, but he forced them to move. He walked across the open floor, crossing the 20-foot gap of isolation. He could feel the eyes of every student on his back. He reached the human table. Aaira looked up, surprised. Is this seat taken? Jax asked, his voice cracking slightly. Aaira smiled. This time it wasn't the scary smile. It was a real one, warm, radiant, and incredibly human. No, she said, kicking out a chair. It's open. I'm Aaira. I'm Jax, he said, sitting down. And I would like to hear more about these dogs. I'll show you pictures, Caleb grinned, pulling out his communicator. As Jax sat there, eating his paste alongside the apex predators of the galaxy, he heard a shifting sound. He looked up. A group of wisps drifted over. Then a Silva. Then slowly the red line dissolved. The cafeteria returned to its chaotic noise, but the fear was gone, replaced by curiosity. Professor Harkin watched from the upper balcony, a small data pad in his hand. Professor Xylas stood beside him, still looking nervous. You were right, Xylas muttered. They are integrating. Faster than I predicted, Harkin noted. I gave it 50 years. It took them 50 minutes. Is that a good thing? Xylas asked. They're still, what they are. Dangerous. Look at them, Xylas. Harkin pointed to the table where Jax was laughing at a picture of a golden retriever. The galaxy is a hostile place, Harkin said quietly. There are wars coming. There are threats in the outer rim that we aren't ready for. We have spent centuries trying to be perfect, polite, and safe. But safety breeds weakness. Harkin put his datapad away. The humans are the antibody. They are the grit in the oyster that makes the pearl. Yes, they are dangerous. But within a generation, every student in this institute is going to want a human on their crew. Not because they are scared of them, but because they know that when the universe tries to kill them, the human will simply refuse to die. Down at the table, Aaira laughed at something Jax said. It was a sound of pure, unburdened joy. Jax looked at her and realized the truth. Aaira hadn't beaten Korg with a weapon. She hadn't beaten the Hive with strength. She had beaten them with the most dangerous human trait of all. She had endured. She had endured the bullying, the fear, and the isolation, and she had waited for the moment to turn enemies into friends. And as Jax looked around the table, seeing the different species laughing together for the first time in the school's history, he realized something else. Being a Deathworlder wasn't about how well you could kill. It was about how hard you would fight to keep your friends alive. And that was a lesson the galaxy desperately needed to learn. And that, my friends, is why you never judge a book by its cover, especially if that book comes from Earth. The story of Aaira and the Institute is a reminder that true strength isn't about bullying or dominance. It's about endurance, intelligence, and the courage to extend a hand when everyone else is making a fist. I really hope you enjoyed this story. If it gave you chills, let me know in the comments. Now, if you want more stories like this, stories where humanity shows the galaxy what we're really made of, make sure you check out the playlist right here on the screen. There are some absolute bangers in there. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to help the channel grow. We are building our own little pack here and I want you to be a part of it. Until next time, stay safe, stay dangerous, and keep smiling.